Okay, so picture this for a sec. You're Sergeant Johnson, fresh out of Psych Ops training, boots on the ground, where? Africa. And your first solo mission. Got to brief the U.S. ambassador on what's what. Talk about pressure.
High stakes for sure.
Big time. And that is the world we're diving into today. R&D Special Operations. And our roadmap,
Yep.
ADP 305.
Yeah, the doctrine, it lays out how it all actually works, like literally.
It's the playbook, right?
Yeah.
But more than just the missions themselves, what I find interesting is how much it digs into the why.
Absolutely, and the impact these operations actually have, shaping global events. We're talking counterterrorism, dealing with WMDs, even, humanitarian aid.
Huge, huge responsibilities. So before we even get into the specifics, got to ask, what even makes these operations special? It's not just like being stealthy or having cool gadgets, right?
Right. ADP 305, it defines these as those unique missions, often time-sensitive, clandestine, usually in some pretty rough environments.
High risk, high pressure.
Definitely. Situations where, your typical approach just isn't going to cut it.
Which brings us back to Sergeant Johnson, our newly minted psychological operations specialist, right?
Yeah.
He's facing a diplomatic challenge here, needs to understand the people, the culture, just as much as any battlefield. And ADP 305, it actually gets into these specific traits that make someone, well, like him, successful in special ops.
Adaptability is huge. I mean, one day you could be in a remote village, the next year in some foreign capital, right?
Hopefully.
And you need to be able to build relationships with locals just as easily as you navigate some crazy terrain. Constant balancing act.
Sounds like being a social chameleon, except the stakes are just way higher.
Way higher, yeah.
Life or death, potentially.
Absolutely.
And ADP 305, it also emphasizes cultural awareness. Like blending in isn't enough. It's about really understanding those social complexities, the customs, even just the beliefs of the folks you're working with.
Oh, absolutely. Because even a small misstep culturally, I mean, that could derail an entire operation. And then on top of that, you've got the mastery of what the document calls discrete operations.
Discrete.
Yeah, minimizing that U.S. footprint while still, achieving these major objectives. These are often small teams, but their impact, huge.
It really highlights the mental and social intelligence needed in these roles. It's not all, just physical strengths, combat skills.
Right.
So knowing these soldiers are such a valuable resource, how do commanders even decide when to deploy them? It can't be for just anything.
Yeah, you're right. It's a strategic decision, and it has lasting consequences.
Oh, yeah.
So ADP 305, it outlines these criteria, very specific, for figuring out if a mission truly needs Army Special Operations. First, is it something only they can handle?
Like you wouldn't call a heart surgeon to set a broken leg.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Second, how does this specific mission, how does it connect to the larger picture, the overall military objective? Has to be a clear strategic reason.
Got it.
These operations, they're about high impact, something that's going to resonate.
So choosing those missions that really move the needle.
Right, but even if those boxes are checked, there's still more. Do we have the resources for this to actually succeed? And we're talking specialized equipment, accurate intel, and oftentimes support from, other units, even entirely different agencies.
That's complex.
Like a finely tuned machine.
Yeah, good.
Every part needs to be working and working right.
And then finally, probably the most crucial question, do the benefits outweigh the risks? Because remember, these are specialized, limited units.
Right.
Losing even a small team, I mean, that has a ripple effect.
It puts the weight of those decisions into perspective. These aren't just soldiers. They're highly skilled specialists.
Exactly.
And that's exactly why ADP 305, it stresses this careful thought process, right? Making sure these forces are utilized strategically.
Absolutely.
So that impact is maximized. Which kind of leads us to the types of operations they undertake, right? Because ADP 305, it covers a range from relationship building to, well, full-blown combat.
It really runs the gamut. So let's start with those relationships. This is where those cultural skills, the adaptability, I imagine, that really comes into play.
For sure. Think about it. You've got security cooperation, training allied forces, joint exercises, all that.
Right.
It's about preventing conflict before it even starts.
Like that old saying, a stitch in time.
Correct. Right.
But on a global scale.
Exactly, yeah. Now, when a crisis does happen,
Right.
natural disaster, conflict bubbling over, special ops are often some of the first ones there. Provide that rapid response when things are really volatile.
And if it escalates, like full-blown combat, those unique skills got to be valuable, even then, right?
Absolutely. Even in a huge conflict, they've got a critical role.
Hmm.
Could be recon deep behind enemy lines, disrupting supply lines, working with the local population.
Intel gathering, all of that.
All of it.
It's amazing how adaptable those skills are. Swiss Army knives of the military, really.
Yeah.
And speaking of ADP 305, it lays out these 3 guiding principles for success. And they're surprisingly simple. Discrete, precise, scalable.
And those 3 words, they really do capture the essence of these operations. So discrete, right?
Okay.
We're talking about minimizing that U.S. footprint.
Right.
Working through partners, making sure our involvement is almost invisible.
They're in the shadows, but they're strategically achieving those goals, but without drawing unnecessary attention.
Exactly. And then you've got precise, that speaks to the surgical nature, right?
Hmm.
Targeting threats with pinpoint accuracy to minimize collateral damage, any unintended consequences, especially in those really, really sensitive environments.
Which we talked about, where one wrong move, that could be disastrous.
Absolutely. And finally, scalable. This one highlights their flexibility. One day, a small team might be training local forces. The next, they're supporting a much larger campaign.
So it really is adaptability and versatility, like we talked about earlier.
That's it.
Now, we've covered a lot, the why of these operations, the who, the when, the where, even the how. But ADP 305, it goes even deeper with what it calls imperatives.
Think of those as the guiding rules, the non-negotiables for how to navigate these incredibly complex situations. And honestly, they're insightful even if you're not, on the ground.
It's like having that top secret playbook.
Yeah.
Okay, so break it down for us. What's the first imperative we got to understand?
Understanding the operational environment, that's key. And that goes beyond just, knowing the location on a map.
Right.
This is about deeply grasping the political, the military, economic, social, informational, even the physical, like everything about where they'll be operating.
It's like those intricate spider webs you see. You touch one strand, the whole thing vibrates.
That's a great way to put it.
These soldiers need to see that whole web and understand how their actions, they're going to cause those ripples.
Exactly. And that leads us right into the next imperative, recognizing the political implications. A lot of these missions, they're advancing these critical political goals, which means every action, it plays out on a global stage.
So even a mission that's tactically brilliant, if it causes some kind of political disaster, it's still a failure.
You got it. ADP 305 stresses political awareness, thinking ahead. It's a different kind of battlefield, one where you need to understand diplomacy, cultural nuances. It's as crucial as, your combat tactics.
But even with all that in mind, special ops, they can't operate in a vacuum. They often got to work with other agencies, domestically, internationally.
Yeah.
It's a team effort, right?
Huge team effort, which is why the next imperative is all about facilitating interorganizational cooperation. That means working seamlessly with everyone, the CIA, diplomats, foreign governments, even NGOs.
So it's not enough to be a good soldier, got to be a good diplomat, communicator, partner.
It's the whole package, because building those relationships, fostering trust, making sure everybody is working toward the same goal, that's crucial for these missions to succeed.
It's the glue that holds it all together.
Absolutely.
It's a good point. That interagency cooperation, it's got to be tough to navigate. So much bureaucracy, different priorities.
It can be, for sure. But when it works, it's crucial for these operations. Like we were saying, it's high-stakes global impact.
And that brings us to, I guess, strategy, right? What are some of the things commanders consider when they're deciding if or how to even use special operations in the first place?
Yeah, good question. So one of the first things, and ADP 305 is really clear about this, is whether or not it actually needs those unique special ops capabilities.
Right, like we were saying earlier, it's got to be the right tool for the job.
Exactly. You wouldn't, use a scalpel to chop down a tree. These are highly trained units, specialized.
So use them strategically.
Yep. So let's say a mission does require those skills, right? What else? Resources, that's a big one.
Okay, now people, right?
More than just bodies. ADP 305, it emphasizes how these operations, they can be very resource intensive.
Makes sense. So it's not just about having enough boots on the ground, but making sure those boots have, the right equipment, the right intel.
All of it. And then some. I mean, we're talking specialized aircraft, the comms gear, surveillance, stuff most people wouldn't even, think of.
It's easy to picture those big budget action movies, but I bet real life is even more, I don't know.
Oh, way more. And then on top of all that, you've got the human element. You need the linguists, the cultural experts, folks who can deal with these complex situations, right? You can't just teach someone that overnight.
So understanding those local dynamics, that's key.
Absolutely. All of that, the training, the gear, the planning, it takes time, it takes money, and it takes really, really careful planning.
Resources are one thing, but, I mean, let's be real. These missions are dangerous. How do commanders weigh that risk, versus the potential payoff?
That's got to be one of the toughest calls, honestly. And ADP 305, it doesn't shy away from that. It talks a lot about assessing, managing risk.
So asking those questions, what are the chances of success? What if it goes sideways, right? How's this going to affect the mission, the troops, even U.S. policy down the line?
It's all connected. And there's no easy answers, that's for sure.
Which really shows the weight of those decisions, right?
Yeah.
They're not just tactical. They could affect the whole world.
Absolutely. So ADP 305, it stresses clear communication, thorough planning, and this is important, constant reassessment.
Got to be ready to adapt.
100%. So we've talked about those general considerations, but let's get into the weeds a bit. ADP 305, it actually get into the specifics of those different units within special operations, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're talking Green Berets, Rangers, Night Stalkers, all those, right? Each one with their own, I guess, specialty.
Exactly. And the document makes it super clear. Each unit brings something unique. Like we were saying, specialized tools, each one for a specific purpose.
So let's open that toolbox. What about the Green Berets, right? They're legendary. Training foreign troops one day, and then it's like these daring raids the next.
Oh, for sure. They're adaptable, that's for sure. Officially, it's special forces. But those guys, they're the masters of what's called unconventional warfare.
Okay, so break that down for us. Unconventional warfare, what does that even mean?
It's about working not just alongside, but really through those partner forces to get it done. Remember Sergeant Johnson, our Psychops guy?
Yeah.
Imagine him working with local forces, some village, right? He's not just teaching combat, but he's building trust, maybe helping them get clean water, medical supplies, who knows? That's the thing, is blending that, the hard power with those softer skills.
It's about enabling them to fight their own battles, but having their back.
Exactly. They become a force multiplier, right? So those local forces, they can handle their own security.
Which means understanding the culture, the language, the politics, all of it.
Huge. And those soldiers, they go through crazy language training. They're immersed in the culture, got to blend in, build trust.
Almost like they're anthropologists as much as soldiers.
Right. That human element, it's essential for them to be effective.
That's wild. Okay, so that's Green Berets. What about Rangers? They've got that reputation, they're the tip of the spear. You need something done, that's who you call.
Right, the Rangers, speed, precision, and, well, let's face it, they're lethal. You need a target neutralized, hostages rescued, whatever it is, they're your guys.
So those intense close quarters fights, that's them.
That's what they train for constantly, and they're the best.
I bet. But even with all that, it's got to be dangerous.
Oh, yeah, there's no getting around that. Inherent risk. But that's the job, right? They get it, and they face it head on.
Takes a certain kind of person.
It does. They're putting it all on the line.
That's for sure. Okay, so we've covered Green Berets, we've covered Rangers. What about those Night Stalkers? That name, it's like straight out of the movie.
It does have a ring to it. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment officially. But those are the elite of the elite when it comes to helicopter pilots.
So they're the ones flying those, I don't know, those crazy nighttime missions, getting those teams in and out of hot zones.
Yep. Trained to fly in anything. Low altitude, under fire, you name it.
Nerves of steel, I'm telling you.
They're the absolute best, and without them, a lot of missions just, they wouldn't happen.
It's like they're that lifeline, right?
Very much so. And yeah, they might be behind the scenes, but without them, it's a different ballgame.
Good reminder that it's a team effort, right?
Yeah.
Every single person, they've got a role to play.
100%. And that's really what ADP 305, it all comes back to that. Seeing how it all works together, those specialized skills, how they come together to achieve the objective.
Like I don't know, like a finely tuned orchestra.
Perfect analogy. But even an orchestra needs a conductor, right?
Right.
Same thing here. Strong leadership, everyone's on the same page, and everyone understands the mission.
Adapting, overcoming, all that.
That's what it's all about. And that's why this doctrine, I think it's so important. Even if you're not, in the military, it shows you how this works.
This has been, it's been eye-opening, really. I mean, we knew the basics, but the why, the how of Army Special Operations, it's a whole other level.
That's a different world.
And ADP 305, seeing how it lays out the framework for all this, the planning, the cultural awareness, the partnerships, it's a lot.
It's impressive, the level of detail.
It makes you realize the world, it's a messy place.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to have, these highly trained folks out there doing this.
Doing what they do. Can't forget that.
Absolutely. So on that note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into Army Special Operations, ADP 305, all of it. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, and maybe a new appreciation for what these soldiers do every single day.
They deserve it.
They do.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep asking questions, right? Keep learning. We'll see you on the next deep dive.